Day 2 of the Michael Shane Paul trial is complete. Investigators charged Paul with murdering Brett Grantham 3 years ago. There's another side to this story, and to find out about that, let's go to News 4's Will Polston in Geneva County. Will?
Thank you, Bayla. Good evening. Now, the defense attorney's version of this story is that Michael Shane Paul, had shot Grantham out of self-defense. Now, there are some early hurdles that the defense is running into, at least from the first day in trial hearing testimonies. Now, the defense attorney had said that Grantham had shot out of a sudden movement, or I should say that Paul had shot out of a sudden movement of Grantham towards Paul inside of his home. And they read a previous statement from Paul that had said that he had believed that Grantham was in possession of one of his firearms. Now, testimonies from investigators as well as Rebecca Holt had put the firearm in a different room at the time of the shooting. Rebecca Holt's name may sound familiar. She was also arrested with Paul during his arrest in April of 21 for hindering prosecution. Now, 3 men also took the stand and testified, saying that they also helped out with the disposal of Grantham's body in Holmes County, Florida. One of those men being the son of Michael Shane Paul. Now, while his son did say that he helped under his own accord, the other 2 men said that they helped in fear of Paul. Now, after this first day with testimonies, a lot is still in the air, a lot of ambiguity, including the relationship between Grantham and Paul, as well as why Grantham was at the Paul residence in the first place. Live in Geneva, Will Polston for your hometown news leader.
Will, thanks so much for that update.